and it led them right to Lower Merced Lake. And it's pretty iced over, but there's the front third of a plane sticking straight out of the mostly frozen lake. Clearly it just crashed, right? And I'm not exactly sure how, but they investigated a little bit of the plane only to discover that it's full of high-grade Mexican weed.
Welcome back to the Backcountry Manifesto podcast brought to you by SharedPoor.com. I'm your buddy Al Wes Hayden Samak, and on this week's show, you're going to hear the definitive story of maybe the wildest event in Yosemite's history. And if you haven't already, check out Stonemasters Part 1, the episode before this one. If you don't, don't be lazy, but if you don't, you'll still be able to follow this, I promise. But the context that Part 1 gives you is going to make the whole thing it's going to make it more compelling. It'll be like a fuller story. You'll have a better idea. Okay, so today we're diving in to the story of Dope Lake. Here's the gist of it. In the spring of 1977, a pair of hikers stumble upon a twin prop plane recently crash landed on the edge of Lower Merced Pass Lake. And that's a small pocket of water deep in the Yosemite backcountry. During the initial investigation of the wreck, park rangers discover that the plane had been carrying around 6,000 pounds of high-grade Mexican pot at the time of its crash. Okay? That's worth more than $15 million by today's standards. Anyhow, the site becomes well-contained and recovery is underway until a late-season snowstorm forces law enforcement officials, now including like a bunch of federal agents, to abandon the site until later that spring, thinking that nobody can get to it because it's 16 miles in the backcountry. Well, as the investigators leave, word of the plane and its cargo, it begins to circulate around Camp 4, Yosemite's countercultural hub and home of the Stonemasters. The Stonemasters. It's a pun. We've confirmed this. To walk us through the unofficial recovery mission that the Stonemasters undertook, we have legendary rock climber John Long back in the studio, this time opposite Vern Clevenger, a fellow Stonemaster who found himself at the very center of the whole ordeal. This is one of my all-time favorite stories, and I know you guys are going to love it too. One quick thing for the people who are listening to this audio version of this podcast, same as last week, this is a composite episode, meaning there are two folks telling you two stories to make one story. Like I said, those folks are John Long, who you got to know in Stonemasters Part 1 if you did your homework, and John Long's friend, fellow Stonemaster, Vern Clevenger, who was directly involved in all the chaos. So, just like last week, when you hear this sound, that means you're going to hear the speakers shift from John.
It was some kind of magic moment, to put it simply,
to Vern.
At this point, we knew the Rangers were going to go up.
And vice versa. Like I said last week, it sounds confusing. It's not. The story is unbelievable, and I genuinely think we have the best folks possible in the studio to lay out the whole thing. So, here it is, the true story of Dope Lake, as told by the climbers who lived it. Explain to folks who the Stonemasters are. And if you haven't listened to this, go back to Part 1. But for the folks who aren't going to do that, because we know how people are, explain real quick who you are, how the Stonemasters came to be, and who they are, and where they are.
Yeah. Well, Stonemasters in the early 70s, rock climbing was in a transitional period between old school sort of quasi-mountaineering, and then the best of those people started moving in a more athletic kind of, movement. But it wasn't, it was a small percentage. And then my generation came along and it became a full-blown adventure sport. And that's the Stonemasters were a ragtag collection of originally a couple dozen people from young guys, 17, 18, and from SoCal, Southern California. They came from surfing, baseball, water polo, a bunch of different other sports. They started rock climbing really early. They started going to Talkies and Suicide Rock and Joshua Tree in the high desert in Southern California. And they were very ambitious, real athletic, and they saw an opportunity to be able to do really historic and interesting things. It was some kind of magic moment, to put it simply, to where the right people at the right time in historically at exactly the right place on the timeline came together, and all of a sudden rock climbing went like whoop, like that, right? The standards went sky high. A bunch of historic things happened, and then the original Stonemasters, after a year, migrated up to Yosemite, which is at that time was the mecca of rock climbing. It had the best stuff, the biggest stuff, the best weather. It was perfect. You could get to it easy. It had good weather. El Capitan was 3,000 feet high, and there was a bunch of other stuff like it. So you had all the venue, all the people. There was a campground, wonderful atmosphere. And so from that, people from all over the world sort of jumped on board this sort of Stonemaster movement, and all of a sudden, something happened and it just took off.
And the story that we have you on telling today is the story of is it called a seminal event? Is that what you would say? A seminal event in Stonemasters history, that being the plane crash in Merced Pass Lake.
Yeah. The interesting thing about the plane crash is because there were so many different factions of people involved in it, there isn't one story. There's like 1,000 stories because people kept coming in from different angles, right? And one group will have one story that doesn't have anything to do with the beginning of the thing, and somebody's a part of the beginning and doesn't know how it ended, or yada yada. But
it's a mosaic.
Yeah, it really is a mosaic, a pastiche of different things. But there are a couple very serious investigative journalists who did. There was a book in the works for a while; it never got done. But there were some serious journalistic sort of efforts that went into trying to uncover forensically what actually occurred in this thing. And probably the most comprehensive of those was an article that appeared in a men's journal way back in the day.
Vern Clevenger agrees with you there.
Yeah. And I spent several years trying to, unearth all this stuff. And without getting too specific, what happened was the Ahwahnee Hotel is a famous high-end, like 5-star hotel. It was built during I think it was during the First or Second World War as a refuge for people soldiers that had battle fatigue. Anyway, that Ahwahnee Hotel is a legendary place, and it has a big staff. And two of the people that were working in the kitchen, guys, went on a cross-country ski trip. These guys took a little LSD before they headed off just to pep things up, right? And they get out about 5 or 6 hours into the wilderness, and they come across a wing of an airplane and a debris trail, and they don't know what's going on, right? And they got to sober up, and it's a freaky kind of there's no bodies or anything, but they're obviously
it's still enough to ruin a trip.
Oh yeah. You freak you out. So it was something that clearly had just happened. There's like oil around and everything. So they whip back back to the Ahwahnee, but they got to hang out for a while until LSD wears off. Down. And they go to the rangers. Goes, hey, looks like there's a plane crash back in the backcountry. We're heading for Upper Merced or Lower Merced Lake back there. And at that time, in the middle of the winter, nobody's going back there. Nobody. I don't know exactly what happened, but some rangers went with them. They went back. They located where the wreck was. They followed the debris trail, and it led them right to Lower Merced Lake. And it's pretty iced over, but there's the front third of a plane sticking straight out of the mostly frozen lake. Clearly it just crashed, right? And I'm not exactly sure how, but they investigated a little bit of the plane only to discover that it's full of high-grade Mexican weed. Okay, like full. So it's a smuggler plane, big 2-engine. I think it's a Howard 500 for whatever that's worth. Anyway, big 2-engine, old style plane, like 50 years old, right? But still can haul the mail. And it's just later they discovered they originally had 6,000 pounds of weed on it.
So the reason that we have you kind of on today was to talk about the 1977 plane crash in Lower Merced Pass.
Lower Merced Pass Lake.
Lower Merced Pass Lake. How did the Camp 4 folks initially become aware of the plane crash?
Well, as far as I know, now this is partially what I've learned and partially what I was told later. I don't know how true parts of this is, and it's been over and over, and it has been so mythologized.
Yeah, it's a personal account.
Well, some of it's obviously bullshit.
Yeah.
Some of those movies are, obviously. But as far as I know, there was 4 employees at the Iwani that went up there in 76.
Okay.
And one was a marathon runner. And I know this to be true. I know him pretty well.
Yeah.
December 76, they cleaned up what they could and carried out. I'm pretty sure that these guys found it by accident.
Yeah. They just kind of a couple hikers stumbled
Well,
on
4
it.
people.
Okay.
And I know 2 of them.
Okay.
And as far as I know, those people got the most money out of it.
Really?
As far as I know, they never worked again in their life.
So you're saying that the first folks that found it, contrary to kind of, I guess, what they're reporting, they actually took some of the contents of this
out.
Yeah.
I think that thing about them going straight through Rangers was bullshit to start with. They might have gotten all the things they could out of it. And 2 people I know never worked.
So those Rangers went back to Ranger headquarters, put the word out, and within 24 hours, all of these federal agencies converge on Yosemite Valley, helicopters, the whole thing, and they start ferrying Rangers and rescue people up to the lake. And of course, in something like that, law enforcement always gets super excited over 2 things: either getting contraband, mainly money.
Yeah.
That's all. That will always be. If you look at the priorities of any of those federal agencies that are after crooks or whatever, what they really want is the money, right? And that means asset forfeiture, any of that stuff. If they can get that, they're going after that, right? Because it goes right into their coffers. And that, but hey, man, this is the United States, money rules, and that's what they want. Second is to be able to make the collar on a big crook. Those are the 2 things that law enforcement just go wild over. A close third is contraband, right? You can't sell it, at least not legally. They can't sell it. That happens probably quite more than we think,
Yeah.
But nevertheless, it makes for impressive pictures, and you're talking tons, right? I mean, it's a pretty romantic story, and all the agencies want the DEA. I mean, everybody was involved in it, right?
And what time of year is this? Like,
it's right over Easter vacation.
Okay, so this is like April.
Yeah. So, it's pretty gnarly. It's starting to warm up a little bit. It's still pretty gnarly.
Yeah.
Cold in the backcountry, all snowed over. So they go great guns for a couple days, and they keep ferrying out all of this weed. Now, at the same time, my cousin, I'm not going to mention who it was a head backcountry ranger in Yosemite, just by a lark. Okay. So I got these reports because when you get that much weed, you got to store it somewhere, but it's soaking wet.
Okay.
And they had to ended up putting it upstairs or maybe it was the first story in where there was a place where they had the jail. So, like that.
Yeah.
With that many people coming through Yosemite, there's going to be crooks. And,
some people who just drank too much at campsite got to go sleep it off.
You got to have a jail to put them in, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes there's violent crimes and what have you. They stick them in jail. Anyway, they put all this weed somewhere right above where the jail was, and it started seeping through because it was soaking wet, right? So, weed juice started seeping through the floor, and soaking everybody in the jail, and it was stinking the place up. They didn't know what to do with it. So it really ended up being sort of a nightmare, right? What to do with all this. So they couldn't just burn it up because it was soaking wet, right? So after about 3 or 4 days of all of these people, the upper or lower Merced Lake apparently was like an ant farm with feds in there.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
They had chainsaws. They were cutting into the ice, trying to get as much of this weed out of there as they could. Then a storm comes, locks the lake down. So they got to suspend operations. And by that time, they thought they had gotten the lion's share of the weed out of there. And it was costing the Park Service so much money to do it. So the superintendent of Yosemite at that time, it's his call on what to do, even though these other agencies are involved. And he goes, this thing is busting me, right? This plane isn't going anywhere. We can't even get the pilot and co-pilot out there frozen in the cockpit. We're waiting until this thing thaws, then we're going to do this because this is just, it's crazy expensive. The other thing is, where's any of this stuff going to go? Nowhere. Nobody's going back there. It's in the middle of the winter. It's 16 miles from the headquarters. You're going to have to tromp in there like post holing all the way back there.
Sure.
Ain't nobody doing that, right? We're going to wait till the weather clears. When the weather's better, we can just hike back there and whatever's left, we'll clean the thing up, the plan was to get a big Chinook or a Hercules helicopter and lift the plane out of there and haul it out of there, which they did eventually. Had to cut it up, I think. Get the bodies out of there, get whatever marijuana's left, yada, yada. At that time, they shut the whole thing down. All the federal officers, the helicopters, they went away.
So they've said, okay, we're confident the scene is secured.
Yeah.
We don't have to address this until it's easier to address.
Yeah, easy. Once winter is gone, we don't need to, apparently you couldn't really hike in and out, and it's 32 miles in a day. You had to ferry everybody in with a helicopter. You know what that costs, man? It's crazy, right? And there wasn't really any place to land. You couldn't really do much. It's just it's a logistical nightmare. Wait till summer, send a crew in there for a week with backpacks, clean it up, get it done, right?
Yeah, because you could just burn it at that point.
Yeah. Just whatever you need to do, you just do it. Just build a big pit and just burn it all up.
There's some backcountry ranger who was like,
yeah,
I'll burn it.
Yeah. Burn a little bit in this pipe here while you're at it. But anyway, the pilot's wife was alerted that her husband was on board this thing and had died. She gets a hold of the pilot's attorney because the feds wouldn't tell her anything other than your husband is dead. He died in a plane crash. And so he goes to Yosemite on her behest, tries to figure out what happened to the husband, right? And I don't know the story behind it, but he apparently was, jiggy to some conversation with the DEA agents that were still in the valley, yada, yada, and found out whatever he could about it and decided that he was going to go to the climbers camp 4, and disclose to them at an open campfire that, guess what happened in your backcountry? This plane crashed and it just happened to be full of marijuana. They recovered what they believe were the lion's share of it, but chances are there's still a bunch of it up there. So just saying, right?
Why did he do that?
According to the magazine article in Men's Journal that I read, the quote was, he thought it was just a shame that all that great marijuana was up there and there was nobody around to smoke it. All right, that's one story. That's one confirmed story. There was another one too, I can tell you.
What was the other one?
The other one was, there was a girl that I knew that worked on the switchboard, the Yosemite Valley switchboard, and this is long before cell phones, right? So any kind of conversation, she was listening in.
You should be hip to it.
Yeah, so listening in going, oh, we pulled out 2,000 pounds of marijuana out of this plane. Dude, as soon as the climbers got wind of that, man, they were on that thing like a stink. Okay? And as soon as, because the place, they didn't rope the place off. They didn't put a sentry out there or anything. There's no security whatsoever. They didn't want to bring any attention to it, and they figured, who's going to be going back to that Lower Merced Lake in the middle of the winter? There's not even any trails, right?
Right.
So word got out probably a combination of both those things and then some other things. I mean, are you really going to be able to keep? That's like an alien,
Yeah.
right? If somebody, that's why off topic a little bit, but I always hear these things that the CIA and this and that, they have an alien body, and can you imagine if anybody had actually captured an alien or a UFO? And everybody since 1935 have kept it a secret. There's zero chance of that ever happening.
Yeah.
Right. And the idea that they'd be able to keep that many people up there with that many agencies, they'd be able to keep it completely under the radar that there was 3 tons of marijuana in an airplane right up the road in a lake. There's no way that that word wouldn't get out. And as soon as the word was confirmed that this is the case and there's nothing stopping you from going up there because there's nobody there, the climbers had a mule train of people walking to and fro.
I love that.
The whole time.
Well, the funny thing about it too is it's like you want to talk about a perfect set of circumstances. Having an airplane full of pot crash in such an area that it's in immediate proximity to pretty much the only people that could go get it at that time of year.
Yeah. Well, they were physical enough to be able to hike in there and see you had a lot of that the plane had broken up when it hit the trees and then ended up in the lake, and the body just like the fuselage of the plane just blew up, right?
Yeah.
But because it was probably during the daytime and it was a little slushy, all the hay bales sort of went down a ways, and then it frozen over, and then the hay bale or the bales of weed came up, and they were just pinned underneath a thin layer of ice, right? And it was spread out over the whole lake. And they got the DEA and the Park Service got a ton, 2,000 pounds of stuff that was right around the main, what was left of the fuselage, the intact piece of it. But over here and over here and over there was another two ton, another 4,000 pounds floating around at various places in the lake. And apparently it didn't sink, right? So guys got chainsaws and would walk around the lake buzzing through the thin layer of ice and, hoping to hit some green stuff. And as soon as it would fly off, they go, that's where there's a bale there. And they kept doing that over and over and over until they had extracted many, many, many hundreds of bales.
We stole the chainsaw for the head of road crew in the Park Service.
Did you?
His name was Ralph Parker, I can say that. And he's the husband of a very famous basket weaver these days, Julia Parker, who's still alive, actually, in her 90s in June Lake.
Huh.
And her daughter, I guess Lucy, takes care of her.
So people have been going up there for a little while now from Camp 4.
Probably 3 weeks. I just don't actually know that part.
Okay.
We heard all these stories coming back of people chipping at the axe and
chipping,
getting
away.
a 200, a couple pounds and saying, well, fuck that. We're going to go destroy this place. And someone's laughing. Well, it's true. Ralph Parker was a very scary guy. So in those days, you want to be absolutely sure you return the chainsaw.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not talking law and order here. You got to you're going to take it back and not say anything.
Ralph my understanding was Ralph ran the road crew up there. I'm pretty sure that's right. And he was a Miwok Indian, all the way across. And he had married another Miwok Indian who ran a bunch of the fine art things up there. And she was a world leading expert on weaving baskets, like a masterful at it. Like the crazy basket is paid $10,000 for, right? She knew how to do all of that. And they had 2 daughters. And, they were both really pretty. And they were both there all the time. And they're fit and, hiking around and little climbing, whatever. So you can imagine how popular they're going to be amongst a bunch of young climbers. And they're, 18, 19 years old. And they were friendly. Not in a sexual way, but they were just... Everybody was friends with them, and they knew who they were. They were in the group basically, and Pop Parker, I didn't really take a shine to people lining up to try to romance his daughters. I mean, they were discriminating, and that didn't happen a lot, but enough to where Pop Parker was like, he'd shoot you.
Yeah. Parker was not somebody you mess with.
No. No. That was a reputation. He'd run over you in the pickup or whatever, if things went south with one of the daughters. So you really had to watch yourself on that one.
And a lot of us were screwing his daughters. Which, well, I guess I said that fully. Half a can for, or thought we were. And I don't know how much of that he knew. Looking at it now, a 45-year-old man, 50, he knew everything probably, didn't say anything. And actually later in his life, later in his life, I went and thanked him for everything he did as a late parent for me. He was kind of a grandparent who took care of me the last few years of adolescence, and he really was. Yeah. I stayed in their house a lot, and he paid the bills. I want that in there if we can.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. He really took care of you.
Well, he really did. He paid a lot of bills, a big extended Indian family. That's what they did, whoever cousins. And to this day, I go back to that family in June Lake if I was in trouble and have a bed for a few nights. And so I finally, another funeral, his son, I went to him and thanked him profusely for those years.
Mm-hmm. That's
But I just want to get that there. You really, if you're going to take the chainsaw, you're going to take it back. You're going to get it back.
Yeah, you're going to give it back to this dude.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So let's go back up to you at the lake. You're up there with the stolen chainsaw on your buddy.
Stolen chainsaw. Did we do it the first day? I think we did.
Yeah.
Walked in. I'm not going to say who got it going. I think he's okay with it, but he starts the chainsaw up. Uh-huh. And that's why our group, or I know me, got a lot of good marijuana out of it, because we had the first chainsaw and we discarded a lot of things that was soaked in oil. Uh-huh. I remember you could tell. I don't know for sure how you could tell.
Yeah.
But most of what I got out of there was not tainted.
And describe how big these bales are. These aren't like little sachets, right?
No. Well, I don't know. It seemed like the same as a bale of hay. I don't know.
It seemed like a bale of hay.
Yeah.
That big.
Yeah. And they're really fucking heavy. And we were obviously, the beginning of our climb, we were all strong. Uh-huh. But to get a bale out of the water, I was completely soaked. All 5 of us were just completely soaked by the end of the day.
Yeah.
I mean, they got thousands of pounds worth of weed out of there, right?
Yeah.
And so they packed up cars and drove them to wherever and consolidated, dried the stuff out. A lot of it it was soaked with aviation gas, so that was a concern. But even that didn't really keep anything from it. It was a minor amount of it that had gas on it.
Well, I've heard rumors that sometimes people would try and smoke it, and it would combust, I guess, more than they intended it to.
I never saw it combust. Maybe it did, or maybe I forgot. It did not happen to me, but I got to say within a week, I stopped because it was terrible.
Yeah.
I might have had, we were going out somewhere for dinner, maybe here and there, but I stopped right then.
It was very super powerful for that time, weed, like stuff you could get in a weed shop now. It was that kind of stuff. A couple of hits of it and just knock it flat. So they could sell it for top dollar, and they started selling pound after pound of it, just turning it over. And these are young climber guys who never had, maybe had a couple $100 here and there from working, but not, now you're talking about people that had tens of thousands of dollars, right? So it was life-changing for a lot of people.
What sort of changes did you
All of a sudden people had cars or, some people actually went to college. It really did alter more than a few lives in a big way.
Was there anybody, were people blowing money?
Oh, yeah, massively. Yeah, they just go, you're talking about, people who had never had any money. They just stream back in Yosemite with pockets full of $100 bills, just buying everything for everybody who cared or went to, so-called climbing trips in Europe and never get out of a whorehouse in Bordeaux. Stay there for two months until they're broke, then come back. All kinds of wild stuff happened out of that. And also, more than a few existing gear and outdoor apparel companies profited hugely from that, and it put them in a much stronger position in the market because of people not knowing what to do with all this money, and they'd just give it to the CEO of the company and go, "Hey man, take this and do something with it. Give me something, give me a job and pay me a salary or whatever. Use this money to do it. But I don't know what to do with this money. We do, so I'm not going to tell you what companies, but yeah, more than a few did.
Well, I'm going to try and get you to I'm going to try and twist your arm privately later.
Yeah, I'll tell you.
Okay, so the way that Vern describes it, there is two factions of people kind of going after this pot. There are the climbers, and then the word gets out to like folks at large, and all of a sudden there start to become some unsavory characters appearing around. You got any insight into that?
Yeah, but my understanding is by the time the unsavory characters are generally not super athletic and super fit, not world-class fitness, right? You had to have that to even get back there. So unsavory characters that ended back on the lake were so beat up by even getting there, they weren't any kind of threat, right? I mean, they're a hindrance. But by that time, my sense of it is that lake had mainly been played out.
Yeah.
All kinds of scragglers could end up there, and maybe they found a bale or two or whatever. But the heyday, hiking 150-pound loads out at a time, nah. The climbers, they just descended on the place too fast, and it was a feeding frenzy, and they just made off with the bulk of it. And somebody wants to go up there and try to do some cleanup, fine.
By then, there was people in the Central Valley up there.
Uh-huh.
And it was actually pretty scary. I didn't really like being there.
Like just folks that you weren't familiar with.
I didn't know any of them. Yeah. They're from Merced, Fresno, I don't know. They're low lifes.
Wow.
I mean, it was pretty down there, people.
Yeah, okay.
None of the people in this room would go and have anything to do with them.
Okay, gotcha.
And this one guy would probably threaten him if we were somewhere downtown L.A., but he wound up having a chainsaw closer than the microphone is to your throat.
Really?
The guy was coming to get our stash. You come 1 second further or you're dead.
The dude that you were with?
Yeah, and he ran the chainsaw ahead of time, revved it up with a guy that far from his fucking throat.
So this lowlife comes over. He's trying to grab your stash. Your buddy who knows how to work the chainsaw takes it, puts it up to his throat, and says,
I can't say it here. He would have got it right next to his throat, and he wouldn't do that, revving it. And the guy backed off instantly because you could tell this guy meant
he was serious.
Can you guess who that was? Well, I'll tell you later. I guess I'll be a little bit careful here.
Yeah, that's all right.
So we had the rest of the day getting stuff out.
Uh-huh. They didn't bother you after that, huh?
I don't think anybody bothered us after that. That might have been a group of people, a dozen or 20, I don't know, staying on their side of the lake. It was a pretty threatening thing.
The lake gets played out. All the pot is gone. For the most part, most of the pot is gone. Everybody at Camp 4 is either very rich or very stoned. And
comparatively to where they came from.
Right.
Not actually rich.
Nobody's like,
there's no millionaires.
My portfolio is doing
none of that. It's just cash rich. All of a sudden, bam! Oh, I got tens of thousands of dollars.
You would think that with all this activity around a site that the service and the feds were already aware of, a lot of people would get pinched for this. And that was not the case. More or less, one person got pinched for that.
Vern.
I should have just gone and just got the chainsaw.
But you decided to get some more pot.
Well, of course, if you have another $20,000, you're going to try to get it.
Yeah.
But, well, anyway, I know we're on the trail. We walked it mostly in the dark. I don't know that anymore either. I don't know why we did that.
Uh-huh.
At this point, we knew the Rangers were going to go up then or the next day. It was pretty common knowledge. So we're going to try to sneak in and out.
Yeah, just get one more load before everything got blown up. If other things were
going on, I don't know what was going on. The whole thing was getting uncomfortable fast.
Yeah.
Because too many people knew about it. We ran into 3 Rangers walking the trail.
Mm-hmm. And you're coming down with a load. Down,
not very far below the lake, maybe 2 miles below the lake. They wanted us to go back to the lake with them in custody. Yeah. And I said, no, you guys are fucking crazy.
Yeah. So
they eventually let us walk down to the valley.
Yeah.
And turn ourselves in the next day.
And you did?
Well, I think Seta had to come get me. I was sleeping in, but he came over to get me.
Somebody just wakes you up?
Well, it was probably 10 o'clock in the morning. I didn't get up very early in those. And I also didn't want to go to jail. I was trying to figure out what I could do about this. But eventually I went over.
Did your buddy turn himself in as well?
He must have, but I don't remember.
You don't remember. So you were in jail by yourself.
Yes.
And to your knowledge, at this point, you are the only person that's been arrested in this whole event.
I don't remember thinking that, but now, of course.
Yeah.
So I was pretty scared about the whole thing all day.
Well, yeah, because it's different. It's like you're in the 70s and you basically just got busted moving even by today's standards, like a significant amount of pot.
Yes.
And like back then, that wasn't like we're going to give you a 4-year suspended sentence.
No,
and that
I didn't know what they could do.
It could screw your whole life up.
It did. They didn't have a hearing till late in that afternoon, which is their right to do.
So you're in jail. You're kind of waiting to see what's going to play out. And
Setnick came to visit me and plugged it in. I should call him and say he didn't need to have done that. But anyway, Chinese pull-ups where you do one pull-up and you do 2 pull-ups 1 minute later.
Okay.
3 minutes to 3.
Yeah.
I got up to 43 pull-ups in 43 minutes, and you had to go back down.
Do you know how many pull-ups that
I don't know.
amounts
Someone
to?
figure that out right now. 43. There's a formula for that. I don't remember. And then you had to do it going back down. You had to stop before you were done. And that's how scared it was, the whole thing.
So that's like over 1,000 pull-ups.
It probably was.
That's over 1,000 pull-ups.
I'm sure
you did it in 43 minutes just to try and get this like nervous energy out?
Yeah, and then you had to go back down. So I was doing pull-ups for an hour and a half.
Jeez.
And I don't know how the pot got to Sonora, but my lawyer sold the pot.
Wait, okay.
This is true.
We need to go back here.
I know you were going to say that.
We can't. My lawyer sold. Okay, so somehow the pot that you had gotten down maybe in the first trip
was clean.
Yeah, it was clean, and it had gotten to him somehow.
I guess we drove it to Sonora. We had to leave probably the next morning.
Mm-hmm.
And he said we have to sell it fast before the thing is flooded.
Mm-hmm.
And it was good.
He's trying to get the best price for it.
Of course he was. You're laughing over there.
And your lawyer sold the pot for you.
Yes. I'm not making any names. I think everybody can figure this out and knows he's somebody climbing scene.
Yeah.
And I don't know what we gave him for it anymore. A commission. I don't know.
So you paid your attorney with pot.
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
And he seemed to be pretty happy with it, but eventually he was disbarred.
Really?
Yeah, it got all fucked up. He didn't come to our wedding 3 years later. He was I don't know, gone too.
Yeah, it sounds like you might have been using the same attorney as Hunter S. Thompson, man. So walk me through what happens.
We were released pretty fast, so he had some backdoor information. He would never tell me why I got out.
Really?
I guess that was part of the deal. I didn't really find out to 2006 or 7 that they had no intention of fucking around with us.
They just didn't want to ruin your life.
They didn't want to ruin our lives. They knew we were just trying to get some money kids.
Yeah.
And really, they weren't much older.
Really?
Setnick was maybe 4 or 5 years older.
So they just kind of used their discretion. They were like, look, these aren't career
No, we weren't criminals.
Kids kind of being stupid.
Well, we were the only people ever arrested in the whole thing, which is bizarre, too.
Yeah.
That's the thing I want to say. I want to back up and say something. I ran into rangers up there, because they knew who I was. No one gave a shit in those days.
Right.
And I found out then that a lot of rangers made money off this thing, too.
In retrospect, my sense of it is that thing had caused enough grief that the superintendent said, the best thing that can happen is for this thing to go away.
Mm.
Right? Nothing can, it can't reflect on the Park Service in any way other than bad.
Sure.
Right? I mean, it's just one of those situations that happens that there's no perfect way to be able to get out from under it in a high profile with a high profile coverage going on. It's like bury it, get that plane the hell out of it, cut it up, drag it out of there, get those bodies out of there, clean the place up, and just call it done, and just forget it. Suppress any inquiries. It's we don't know that there was different people working here then. I don't know. I wasn't here. Yeah, and I wouldn't be surprised. Are you kidding me? Of course, some of the rangers were in on this. You're talking about people right out of college who joined the Park Service that are up there, and there's 5 kilo bales of weed that go for $18,500 a pop, and you got 800 of them, and who's going to miss a couple?
Yeah,
it's that kind of thing, right?
If you were to err on one side, calling it tragic or not, where are you at with it now?
I'm going to be more on the tragic side these days.
Yeah. Huh.
Sure, I got nice money out of it and made it work the rest of my life.
Yeah.
But really, I think now there's a lot of tragedy in it. And now I'm realizing more things at it. And I remember seeing the pilot down there.
Really?
And this is not a men's journal. I guess he interviewed me for a good half a day on the phone.
The writer, the men's journal.
And then someone else came along, the editor or vice president or something, and they didn't put this in there. But we found the pilot and the guy I was with had the balls to go through the dead man's clothes.
Really?
I wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
And he found a pack or a wallet.
Uh-huh.
I remember $1,800 in the wallet.
Mm-hmm.
He counted it out. And I says, keep the fucking money. It's too weird for me.
Yeah.
2 deaths, and the widow, me seeing the wallet come out of a dead body thing, soaked in blood and frozen. It was pretty weird.
It was heavy.
And it's a little strange.
Yeah.
I'm glad it doesn't happen now. I probably have more feelings about it being older. When you're 21 or 22.
Yeah. It's just kind of something that happened.
It kind of happened. Now as I get older, I am a little more uncomfortable about it.
It bothers you?
I guess it is right now sitting here. I've changed a lot over the years from the, asshole climbing in every day and try to do better for, 10 years, 15 years to now being a father and later in life and looking at life differently.
Why do you think?
I think it's a normal thing. I would say anybody who's aware of life, who doesn't get locked into not being a corporate guy who doesn't think about themselves, you wind up deciding what you want to do in life. And you realize how unimportant you really are. But you also have more feelings about when you're younger.
Vern contends that he thought that it was a sort of tragic thing in some ways.
Yeah, it was. How many times have you ever seen, well, let me put it this way. Have you ever seen any of that media that they do follow up on lottery winners? It ruins people's lives. They always end up dead or broke or whatever, right? Why is that? Because they didn't earn it. It's that simple. When you just give somebody a bunch of stuff, it doesn't have the same meaning as if you're doing something like this and you make some money. It's not a self-directed kind of thing. It's just money from heaven. And I can tell you, having been grown up, sort of grown up in Venezuela, and they had all of this oil resource, that oil, which was just a boon that just happened to be on their land, it ruined that country. It's like free money, right? Look what it's done to places like Iraq, and I mean, it hasn't built those countries into superpowers in the right way. And the same thing applies to individuals, I believe. Somebody goes up there with high balloon ideas, idealistic ideas about doing historical rock climbs, that ends up with $100,000 in their pocket and forgets about everything that had been meaningful to them. And all of a sudden you're out doing what? Spending money on nothing, that's not connected to any kind of
apparently French prostitutes.
Yeah. I mean, that's going to, what is that? That's not getting anybody anywhere, man.
Yeah.
So yeah, in that sense, it was a tragic mistake, really.
There were a few, aside from the pilots, there were like a few deaths that kind of happened in and around that event. Pretty.
Yeah, nobody really knows about that, whether it's coincidental or mob stuff or, I mean, who's Gensky or whatever the guy's name was, the pilot, he didn't own the stuff. who did that pot belong to?
Right.
Who is out 6,000 pounds of weed? That's a lot of money, right? Somebody was out that and the plane and all yada yada, right? So somebody had to really take a hit over that, and they're not going to be that pleased about it. What are they going to do though? Hike up there and try to fend off the climbers? No way. It's not their terrain. I don't care if you went up there with machine guns.
You ended up selling this story. Because if one person made money from this in like a legitimate way, it was you. And you weren't even at.
No, I didn't go to the lake.
You weren't at the lake because you were in college at that point.
No,
in time,
I was up there when it happened.
Oh, were
and
you?
I had to go back to school.
Oh,
right?
Gotcha. Okay.
And I wasn't really interested in going up the lake anyway. Didn't sound like my kind of thing. I was never that.
How old were you?
I would have been 20.
You and I were very different 20-year-olds.
Yeah.
Because that sounds like it would have been exactly my thing when I was 20.
I mean, I wasn't that enchanted about the money. It just never enchanted me. And that's all there was up there. I'm not slogging up there in the snow to make a couple hundred, I'll make money some other way, man. Fuck that.
Yeah. Well, and the other way that you made money was...
Yeah, I took the story and bent it around and reshaped it. And, I was Jeff Long did probably a better job of taking that story and turning it into something. But between the two of us, they ended up with that Sylvester Stallone movie based very roughly on the idea that a plane crashes that has a bunch of stuff in it and it causes all of this, rigmarole.
Yeah. But that movie's cliffhanger.
Yeah.
Very cool, man. Well, I appreciate you coming on, telling this story. I found out about this story through a movie called Valley Uprising, one of my favorites. You guys should definitely go check it out. I mentioned this before, but the guy who did the animation for the intro, he did all the animation, or a very considerable amount of the animation for Valley Uprising. It's a wonderful documentary.
I was in it a bunch, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't need to go see it.
No, not you, him. Or not him, but them.
She's seen it a bunch of times.
John, I'm addressing the camera.
Oh, I got sorry. I don't even know who you're talking about at this point.
Well, John's seen it. I've seen it. You should go see it.
I got you.
Thank you very much for coming on, man. I
No
appreciate
worries.
you telling the story.
I thought you were pointing right to her.
No. I was
reason.
pointing at them.
I'm
I
like,
can see
really?
how you think
You've seen that thing 100 times, man.
Yo, I love it.
I'm getting tired, I guess.
Oh, that's perfect. Let's go climb.